Okay, cosmology of change part 2. Let's get back to what we saw last time. To receive, I need to change shape, going from concave or flat to concave. To emit, I have to go from concave or flat to convex. To deflect, I have to go into any other form, creating basically ramps that will deflect either the ball but any incoming movement. So now, this is the part related to shapes, forms. Now, to receive someone coming to my house, I have to create space so that he can enter. So this goes into a field of directions and movements. To receive, I follow along the vector force, the direction of the incoming force. To emit, I go towards the incoming force or the existing object. The object can be static. If I go towards it, it's creating an emission. If both of us go together, it's emission against emission. It creates what we'll call opposition. And now, if I move in any other direction relative to the incoming force, we'll get either dodging, evading contact, or we'll get deflection. Form, movement, density. Density, if I receive, I need to create emptiness so that it can be filled. If I want to emit or send or give away something, I need to create fullness so that I have something to give. In between fullness and emptiness, you'll have pressure changes, density changes, which will guide the movements related to density. So these movements are very, very simple. We saw that they're based on pressure, which is a translation for push. Pressure goes from high pressure towards low pressure, meaning it goes from an area that's pushing more and invading into an area that's pushing less. Although since it's still pushing, except if it's a void, in which case it's filled completely very strongly, but since it's still pushing, energy will be expended in both ways, and the push from the stronger force will still be slowed down. Form, direction, density. Basic alphabet is complete reception, is a change of form or shape, concave, a change of direction, following the movement, following the incoming vector, accepting it, and a change of density from full to empty. All these three aspects are again the reenactment of this basic duality that we saw between emptiness and fullness, being and non-being. Receiving means creating space for something else or another to exist into my space. To do that, I need to empty myself. I need to create space. So space being relative emptiness inside myself. I can create it by moving. I can create it by moving at a smaller scale. So what we call a change of shape is actually moving back, but just on a smaller scale, at the scale of the receiving area. Same for emission. Emission, the change of shape is actually just the point of contact going against or towards the center of the object. And same for deflection. So the third principle that we saw, the pressure, is already the relative fullness against emptiness. Density can be applied into many different fields. We speak of density of population, so you picture space, which is a territory, and you put more and more people over a definite area of this territory, confined space, and you increase the density. You have less and less emptiness in between the existing beings, in between fullness. Best way to depict it would be the analogy of the bar room. So the bar room, you'll find three variables. You have the size of the bar, you have the amount of people inside, the amount of people trying to come in, and you have the activity. So these three factors will define the guiding force for any movement related to density, which is pressure, which is simply a push. So pressure is force applied over a surface or volume. And now we can understand it very easily with this analogy. If you have very few people into a small bar and not doing much, like drinking at the counter, there is very low pressure. They can move around without interacting together. And this could be compared to a gaseous state of matter, gaseous phase. Now you bring more people inside, and it will be more and more difficult to move around without interacting with others. So at one point, this gaseous configuration will change to what we will call a fluid configuration. At this stage, movement of one person will imply a reconfiguration of many of the others, but you have still a lot of space, so it's still fairly easy for people to flow through. Now you add more and more people, and the room at one point becomes packed at one scale of beings. One scale is very important, because if you have a room full, like a room completely filled with adults, may still have room for younger children. There's them being smaller and filling small gaps that the adults wouldn't be able to fill. If the room is filled with young children, you'll still have room for cats, or maybe dogs before, then cats, then rats, then insects. So full is, as we've seen with emptiness and fullness, is always relative. It's never absolute. So if the bar is completely packed, you can still bring more people by organizing the people inside. If you put them in rows and then in more structured ways like King Kong's or whatever be the name, you can pile more people and you'd go from a solid phase to a crystalline phase or to a metallic phase with more and more order and more and more link between people. Link would mean here that anyone entering would create a push that would be transmitted directly from person to person via direct contact. While before, in the fluid phase, a push acting upon a person or a small group would not forcibly change the entire frame. When things are very dense, the dissipation of energy would be slower, meaning that it will move slightly many people, many elements, while it will happen faster with more fluid, where it will go to pockets of emptiness and redistribute forces there. So if we go back, we have receiving that relates to creating more emptiness. We have emitting that links to creating more fullness. And we have deflecting and transforming, which are changes applied. So now, let's see practical applications. I can receive a ball with any part of my body, and I could throw away with any part of my body also. It will be more difficult to show. I can receive. The next stage of receiving is storing, and the next stage is closing up the shape and protecting it. So if you picture a potter, the potter would start from a concave bowl of clay, and then from this bowl of clay it can create a hollow shape, a hollow inside, and it could start, if we see the entire, it's not how you would do the pottery, but if you start from a block of clay, you could flatten it, and you'd have the first shape that could actually hold solids. If I create a convex shape, as you see, the ball, even the solid, will roll down. Obviously something square would not move if I do not move otherwise, but principle would remain the same. So the potter would go from creating a plate too long.